Alright, here we are with another episode of The Zombie Train. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back. We are doing some terrain work today all over the map, mostly centered, well, Mountain Division, pretty much primarily, or pretty much completely. Because, well, it's the area that needs the most work, aside from what I mentioned last time, which are areas we're not going to concern ourselves with for a little while. And this is, in essence, some of the last stuff that we have to do in terms of terrain work. Although, the last stuff we have to do is a very, very large area, and I'm kind of excluding the stuff that I really don't need to do. There's a lot of area that could use work, but I'm saying from a Iron Horseman Chronicles point of view, there's a lot of areas we don't need to touch. However, eventually the map will be complete, and yeah. Hopefully, ideally, right? So picking up right where we left off last time, I am working on this area right over here near Layton. We get this bridge in place. It takes me a minute to find a bridge I like. I put that one down and go, and then go through a bunch of other possible options, don't get the bridge that I like, realize that I was in the buildings tab, put that down, whatever that was. And then eventually come back to the bridge that I was at originally. Which just goes to show, you should probably just go with whatever you have on hand and replace it later if you find something nicer. I realize I missed with the road there. And then I just come in here and straighten up the splines. Adjust heights and stuff. I noticed that it was kind of wedged into the ground, which isn't preferable. So, we're going to come through here working, and this episode is actually broken into 4 segments, which is kind of high, actually, for a normal episode, but the reason for that is that I don't like you... No. The reason for that is that, well, first of all, I had to institute a minimum time constraint, so each segment is, in real time, about 20 minutes long. Which, when you break that down, ends up being about 4 minutes long. With the episode coming to be about... wait, hold on. Did I do that math right? 20 minutes... No. That'd be sped up times 5. Okay, we're in a different section now anyways. The minimum section length is about 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, for a 20-minute segment. Because you divide 20 by 8. Yeah. I don't know, I went with 4 minutes. Oh, I found that broken texture. I'll have to go back to that one, because that's trippy. Oh, excuse me. Kind of weird. So anyways, we're doing a lot of texturing around the gorge. Honestly, the gorge is not as bad as I needed to look for the PSA, but it's not as good as it could look either, so we're running into that sort of problem. We are working on the riverbed, we're working on the walls. I found a couple of textures that worked and just started using them. I mean, there isn't too much to get into specifics here. There's just, I don't have a sediment texture that I could stick alongside there, or not one at least that I like very much, and that would look good stretched out. So I just kind of stick with the palette that I have. Even though maybe that top section isn't the best, we're going to come over with another kind of grass in a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean whenever I actually do that, because I haven't done that yet. One of the things we need to really do is get all the groundwork in, and that's obviously important. And I'm taking it one little section at a time, because there's a lot of it to be done. It'll get done, though. It'll get done. Anyways, I actually end up dividing this up into sections to work on. Of course, this right here is just me, taking on a little bit. And you really have to be attentive to which way your plane is pointing, basically. Which way is down slope. And, and that could be on a 45-degree angle, it could be on a 90, it could be on a 37.23 degree angle. You don't know, you need to experiment, because if you aren't aligned to it, you'll get these ridges. And we've seen them before, we know exactly what they look like. And that's exactly what I'm trying to avoid, because it's kind of, well, it doesn't look good, for one. And you can texture around it, in a lot of cases we have, but that only works for really, really big things, and things that are not really flat at all. Like if we have a plane section with a bunch of these, striation lines in it, that's not right, and it's not realistic. Alright, so here's another segment of video, working on the same section. What's funny is I actually did a lot of work in between the videos, especially between this one and the last one. A lot of it, of course, was just boring terrain work, but that's really all this video is. But it's cutting out different sections to work on. It's a lot of it you need to make triangles, basically, is what I learned. When you're making a flat section with 4 corners, sometimes it won't be flat, because if you think about it, even holding by the corners, you can snap a square in half. You can't snap a triangle in half holding by the corners. Well, I mean, I guess you can, but good luck with that. Like a square, you can... Basically, a triangle is the base form of geometry. You can cut a square into 2 triangles. You can't cut a triangle into any other shape. You can cut it into more triangles, but they're still triangles. And you wouldn't be able to start at the corners for either of those. Alright, so I will point out that in the last section, which is about 2 minutes out, there were people in here, and I was showing them around a little bit. So it may be a little bit less productive and a little bit more distracted than previously. Also, I've found the advantage of working in 20-minute segments is you can dodge the autosaves a lot of the time. That's if you really do it well, but it's only worked out. I've never planned for it, I'll say that much. But it works out occasionally. It's worked out thus far. So working in another triangular section, of course following on a 90-degree line there, which probably isn't the perfect downward vector, but it's close. And that's really all it needs to be, especially... Basically, the larger area you have, the less it really matters. Because if you have a particularly large area, if it's kind of wonky, then it's going to happen anyways. And if it's not, well, you generally can't see how much, how much change you're getting in there. But either way, that means if you have an area that's kind of uncertain, you want to narrow it down. You want to break it down to the smallest sections, and you really need to figure out where those lines are, or else you'll do what I'm doing here, which is basically repaving a section, because it was just weird. It wasn't going to line up right. So here we come across this way. This is another one of my foundation lines, because I wasn't going to go with the corner section there. Still split it into triangles, because that's just what you got to do. And maybe I should have done it a little bit differently, but this is how we're going to run things today. So, I split the triangles into smaller and smaller and smaller triangles, and honestly, sometimes doing that helps you get a feel for where the vector of down actually is. But in this case, it just kind of helped me sort things out. And I was doing this right before class happened, and I ended up having to run because I insisted on finishing this section instead of, just leaving it half done and going off to class, because I'd already met my 20-minute quota for this video, or for this part. The last few things done, I ran away. And so here we are, doing some sections that are right up against the face of the canyon there. Now you'll notice that these are sections that there's stuff done next to them that wasn't done before. And that's because in between I did, well, I won't call it, it wasn't an insignificant amount of work. I did plenty of work, but the reason I didn't record it is because I honestly expected to get interrupted any minute, and it didn't happen. Well, it did a couple of times, but it wasn't what I was expecting. I expected to get interrupted there, and so I'd have to cancel the recording. If it was under 20 minutes, I would have avoided my, I would have avoided it. I would have had to do a different recording. So, anyways, I decided not to record it, and then when the time finally came where I knew I had time, that's when I kicked in the recording and did the last 50 minutes of the episode. So, really, it wasn't too hard, this section. It was just sort of weird, because I was needing to attach a more or less curved section to another more or less curved section, and actually getting them to blend together was something of an issue, especially towards the end, and eventually I think I gave up, or didn't give up, but I decided that going with what I'm doing all the way to the end would have been kind of a mistake. So I went to the end and I boxed out a separate area, did that right away, and then came back. And also the other thing that was wonky about this section is you're not working on the grid lines. Normally I at least try to, sort of. Even when I'm making my weird triangles, you know, if there's something, unless it's really out there, I try to keep at least one side either on the grid line or, you know, at a 45 to it. And these are almost at 45, so it's something. But I just was having trouble gauging exactly where the end of track should be, and that's why you'll see me putting in these little extra terrain tracks that are basically just bonus, and to smooth them out. So I did that real quick, came back here, did that. You know, 3 at once, got things done a little bit quicker, but not too much quicker. I mean, honestly, I've found that you can sacrifice your precision for speed. Okay, here's me boxing that out. And sometimes it's worth it, and sometimes it's really not. And most of the cases I deem it not, because I want to know what's going on with an individual section while I'm trying to work on it. If I throw down a bunch of lines like that, and then go over it and something's really wrong, then I have to redo the whole section. If I'm doing one at a time and I come across one that's wonky, like really wonky, then I can just redo that and continue with that vector in mind. You know, it's the little things that helps teach you, you know, where you're going right and where you're going wrong. And doing a whole section at once isn't really advisable unless you know where the downward vector is, and you, on top of that, know what you're doing. Which, you know, that's why I don't do whole sections at once. Usually. The easiest ones to do are square or rectangular, because especially if one of the sides, or, you know, 2 of the sides are flat, the 2 opposite sides are flat, and then the other 2 opposite sides are the same slope, then you can just apply a slope through the whole thing using terrain tracks, or even using a slope tool if you want to get, if you want to start gambling, because the slope tool is not, the ideal tool, and why, what I mean is you can get the basic, like, topography sort of, what do you call them? Well, the basic topography, what happened? The basic topography ideas, and terrain maps that you can just sort of plop down in the editor there. What was that? Oh. Or, you know, in Surveyor here, you get the height maps, and you can use those, and they're stupid, and they don't work very well, because if you start them from, autosave. If you start them from, what do you call it? You know, 0, that works just fine, but, you know, I never feel like you can cover enough ground with them to make them really, really worthwhile. And sometimes, maybe, but I've never really been able to use them to any effect, to any really, really strong effect, I should say. And so here we go, doing the finicky bits, and of course you guys know how much I love these, and that's actually not sarcasm. I do take pride in the amount of time I spend just adjusting one little grid line by one little grid line, and it's nice, you know? I mean, the whole thing is kind of therapeutic, because unless your train crashes, which it happens, but unless your train crashes and you lose all the stuff, it's just very simple, you know, it's, in other words, it's monotonous, but that's not necessarily a bad thing when you're trying to find therapeutic work. You want something that you don't need to, you know, put too much mind into, and you know probably won't frustrate you too much. And doing terraining is definitely one of those things. Because unless you're screwing with you're screwing up the controls, or you're just kind of not doing it right, or, you know, you think what you've done is a total wash, then that'd get you frustrated, sure. But if you're taking pride in what you're doing and going, okay, this looks okay, it'll probably help your mood. Anyways, so then I come over here with the regular raise height tool because I feel like it deserves to be raised and not flat, and I need to put some interesting looking hills and or mountains in the background just to make it something. And I think I got distracted there for a minute. I don't know what with, but we're about to end off the episode here with me doing a little bit more heavy duty terraining. Actually, no, it wouldn't be heavy duty terraining because I don't break out the tracks for it. What I do is I just carve a couple of deep not streams per se, but just like this area goes down and where water would flow. So that's I think some of the last stuff I did today, and I will see you guys next week with another episode of the Zombie Train when we work even more on sections like this. Train Man out.